Welcome to Rendering Insights. In this video, we're going to draw a 1938 Ford Hot Rod. Super cool car. We're going to be using Adobe Illustrator for the line work and then bringing those lines into Photoshop, and we're going to build this drawing in layers, and we're going to go step by step on how to do that. If you find this video helpful or insightful in any way, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That'd be great. All right, this is the drawing we're going to do today. Super cool car. Black cars for me have always been the most difficult to illustrate just because they have so much depth to them. The reflections are crazy in them. So we're going to take this apart, and I'm going to show you how I illustrated this, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. All right, let's get started. Okay. Here we are in Adobe Illustrator. And what I did was I found a photograph that I liked of this 38, and I scanned it in and then did a simple line drawing using the pen tool in Illustrator. Again, in this video, like most of mine, we're not going to demonstrate how to use all of these tools because there's thousands of videos out there on how to use the pen tool and the scissors and so forth. But this is just to basically show you how to build your drawing in layers, how to render it once you have your lines. Okay, so I went ahead and did this basic outline of all the basic shapes on the car, this grille, and took the time and built all these things, stick built them with the pen tool. All right, and since this is a complicated car, in the depth of the paint in a black car, it has those real rich reflections that are really hard to capture. So I went ahead and did some basic horizon lines in Illustrator first on a separate layer. Let me show you what I'm talking about. See on this rear panel along the door and on this left rear, these shadows and these horizon line here, it looks really strange right now, but I just looked at the photograph and saw where those reflections will be, even though they're buried deep in the paint. So there's one over on this right front fender. This is what it looks like up front. It looks like a really bad graphic on the car, but trust me, later when we start building these layers, these will pay great dividends. All right, and also let me get rid of those because they're very distracting. And I went ahead and built in the horizon like on this front hubcap. Now it's just nice to have it in place. All right, like this running board, I did on a separate layer. The reason I did that that way is that we can, when we render this, we shade this. We have a lighter on top and then a little bit darker down on the side, usually anyway, a reflection from the ground or something. Nice smooth transition in here, and then we can drop in that grid that's on the running board on top of that, and it makes a really nice piece that way. A few other things I did on separate layers. I don't want a lot of detail showing through this windshield. But over here across on the other side for the other doorway, I went ahead and did this little line in here that I can drop in. Okay, that'll come into play later. Here, let me show you when the basic lines are gone. See this in here? And also the shadow, the basic shadow of the car. It's not much. It just kind of sneaks down along here. I put that on a separate layer so we can drop that in and build that to the value that we want. See where that is under the car? The only other thing we did, like on some of the other videos, I like when there's glass or windshields or clear emblems, you want to be able to put some reflection over the top of your color, how you've rendered the lights or windshield or whatever. So on these headlights, these cool teardrop headlights, I went ahead and did a separate layer of those lenses. Let me show you what that looks like. So later, we can put this layer on top of our color layers in Photoshop. We can do some really cool little reflection lines on here, and it makes it look a little bit more realistic, if that makes sense. All right, well, there's our complete lines of the car in Illustrator. So what we'll do now is grab that, bring that into Photoshop, and we'll start building this rendering in layers. All right, here we go. All right, here we are in Photoshop, and we brought in our line drawing. And again, I like to go ahead and make maybe half a dozen copies Just duplicate those layers and stack them on top of each other, lock them, and we'll save them for later as we build our rendering and layers. All right, the first layer, the bottom layer, I still like to come in here and do a white fill background. It may not even come into play so much on this drawing, but I like to have that white background. Sometimes we'll start shading right on top of that white, and you want that clear white value to come through and not have the background peek through. So let me show you what that looks like when we white this background. All right. This gives us a good foundation to build our color layers on. And I've gone ahead and blacked in our shadow underneath, put a little glow around that. So that just gives us our foundation to start building our color layers. Now you remember that crazy horizon line layer that we had down the side of the car and the one on the front fender? I brought those in a separate layer and put them in here. And I'm going to show you, I've already applied some basic colors to the car, dropping in those basic coloring book colors. This is going to look kind of strange. You have to trust me. In Illustrator, when we did this horizon line and these panels here, they were in black. But when I brought them in Photoshop, I went ahead and took the bucket tool, the fill tool, and just dumped on this brown. You know, I'm kind of guessing how I'm going to build this this color. I'm trying to replicate this black paint. It's so hard to do. So I just did this in a brown, and then just took kind of this darker French blue and this brown color that might simulate the reflection of the ground, and put those in there as a basis, and then we'll start putting black on top of it. And same on the wheels. I went ahead and on the hubcaps and on the wheels themselves, just did a lighter tan that might simulate what the reflection would be on the ground or on the sand. See on the front bumper, even on these headlights, this hubcap, even the sky over here. Then we'll start building later. Again, like I say, we have black tires, and a lot of people go ahead and make those black and add highlights later. I like to use the lighter color. Usually I use a gray for tires, and then come back with the black and shade. But this case, since we have such a warm background, the ground around it, I went ahead and put in a brown, kind of a bronze color, and then we'll add some black shading on top of that and start richening that up a little bit. All right, so here's our basic colors. And on some of these chrome strips, I've selected those with the magic wand tool and gone in here kind of tight and just brushed in some light blue that where I think the highlights will be from the sky and over here. And we are going to get some reflection of the ground in here. So that's what I've done. This looks pretty crude, again, like a coloring book. But we can deal with this a little more later as our layers continue. So basic reflection of the ground and what the sky would look like, and then we'll tighten those up as we go. So for our next layer, we open up another line layer and we start dropping in some black. I've done this reflection that does not look realistic at all as a basis for this deep, rich black paint job. Then we're going to start piling black on top of it. So this is what that looks like. I've selected each of these panels and start brushing in with that brush tool black. Kind of did some shading up on top of here and just went pretty heavy down the side. I kept brushing that in. And remember, you can back up. If you don't like what you've done, you can get rid of it. Up on the hood, went a little heavier up here on the side, left it a little lighter on top that might look like reflection up on the crown. And start putting a little bit of shading up in this canvas roof. Okay. This next layer, see what I've done? This had all that black we just put in. I was worried that we're going to start losing too much of the ground reflection. So on the next color layer, I went ahead and went in and added some more brown down here. Just a little bit, because I don't want to lose the idea that this is sitting on the ground. And it just helps make it look a little more realistic, but it still needs more black, me and black, right? So for the next layer, we start adding more black on top of that. Here's where we added that brown. Next layer, we come in and throw more black on top of it. This was a challenge for me, just to try to build this layer. You know, a great black paint job on a car is amazing. I feel like you can reach inside there and move around a little bit. And that's what we're trying to unpack on this drawing. So through this black, you can see the reflections there, but it's so subtle. It's just kind of in the background. That's what we want. We don't want it to be in your face at all. But that's the basic paint job on the car. Now we're start working on some other details. Remember we talked about this running board, how we did the shading on here, have a little bit of reflection darker up here, maybe bouncing off the side of the car, and a little darker on the side, lighter on top. But we need that tread pattern on here on this running board, so we'll drop in that layer now. See what that does? Nothing fancy. It isn't a real tread, it's just a bunch of lines. But on top of that shading, it makes it look pretty realistic, at least where your eye doesn't go to it and go, hey, what's wrong with that? And we talked about these headlights. I've done more on this one than I planned in the individual layers, doing some highlights and some shading. But on the top headlight layer, I decided to put in some lines. I went back into Illustrator and just drew some lines, because a lot of these old period correct teardrop headlights had this little grid pattern, these little highlight lines in here. So that's what we've done in here. That's what that looks like. Looks kind of realistic, looks a little bit hokey, but when everything's together, you don't really think about it. All right, it's all kind of illusion. We're playing a little bit of smoke and mirrors here. All right, our drawing's starting to come together. Little by little in these layers, I start rendering, start putting shadows and highlights like on these fog lights. The details. You can back up a little bit and see. Just addressing each portion as you go. Okay. Now we need some more highlights. We need some things to brighten up this car. Looking at your photograph or your common sense, once you determine where your light source is going to be, you can kind of tell from the photograph where the light source is, what time of day it is, and where it's coming from. I've already brushed in a lot here on the grill, kind of some basic highlights, or to help make this look round, like it's curved as it moves forward. It's such a cool grill. But I've dropped in some other white in here. See what that does? I brightened things up on the fender and some hot spots on the chrome, on the wheel. See the hubcap? See what that did? In a few places on the crown on these body panels. Certainly makes your chrome come to life. Your headlights. And I love what it did on this grill. Now, ideally I could have made these little highlight ring look just perfectly straight. That means our grill is straight. All those panels are perfect. But in real life, that's usually not the case. They tend to not line up absolutely perfectly. So throwing a little ripple in there, it makes it look a little more realistic and creates some interest too. I went ahead and dropped some in here in this back corner, these recesses. And on these side vents, just a little bit. Went in here pretty tight. Put those highlights in. What's nice, Photoshop, you can come in here real nice and tight and work on these details, and it's pretty easy to do. Then when you back off, it looks really good. Okay. The last thing I did on top of these highlights is I wanted to put some little star reflection. Since this is a black car, and obviously it's in the heat of the day, we're going to have some real sparkles. So something else to add besides just these spots, I went in Illustrator and created a little star reflection, a little spider star, okay? And I dropped them in here, and I did quite a few of them, and I've just put them on one layer. See those on top? If we get rid of those highlights, you can see them a little better. They look a little bit funny, but when they're on top of your other highlights, they make sense. Okay? That's what I like to do. Normally, I would never use this many on the car, on the chrome. I don't care how much chrome it has. I wouldn't do this many. But on this car, I just kind of needed it. On this windshield frame, it's a little hard to see. I just thought it added a little sparkle to the car. All right. Now the only thing left is the background. Much like I did with the drawing we did on that Model A coupe, I just wanted a gradation background. Goes from top to bottom. In this case I went from black down to a bronzy color that might kind of look like a desert dirt color that might get a reflection on the car. It's not, it's darker than this, but let me show you what that looks like. It just helps the car to pop out, makes the white part of the car just jump to the foreground. Is that cool? You can do all kinds of things, but I kind of like these big gradations. Then I decided to put a border around here. This is what I picked. Something in the same hue, kind of right out of the middle here, and dropped it on top. And I love what that does. Again, like some of the other drawings, see how this border looks like it's changing color? It's not. It's one color. But being on top of this gradation in the background, it changes. Let me show you. See what that is? That border is one color. But when we put this crazy background behind it, that border takes on a character all of its own. All right, well, there's our drawing. Hope you enjoyed that and hope that was helpful. Well, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful in any way, please check out our other videos available on Rendering Insights.